Obrigado. Moving on, our next speaker is Michael Hauser, who is a researcher here at the Academy of Sciences, the Czech Academy of Sciences, in the Institute for the Study of Contemporary Continental Philosophy. And his work focuses on postmodernism, on critical theory, Adorno specifically, as well as post-Marxism. And the title of his talk, which I'm looking forward to hear, as I said before, is The Event as a Dynamic Latency, the Appearing Mediator between Badiou and Marx.
So I will touch a delicate issue, which is a gulf between Badiou and historical materialism. From a perspective, historical materialism can be seen as something different from democratic materialism. We cannot proclaim that historical materialism is voicing that there are only bodies and languages. On the contrary, we can say that historical materialism states that there are bodies, languages, except that there are revolutions. And from this point, we can add that truth in the famous statement or formulation of materialistic dialectic is only a part of the general historical materialism position that plain to tell it plain and simply, truth are nothing else than two revolutions. And we can see it above all in the case of the event. What is to event, as a matter of fact? Is it something else than another word for revolution? So, but there is a gulf between historical materialism and Badiou's theory. I can sum it up in two kinds of objections. You can read from time to time articles on this point appeared in the journal Historical Materialism. The first kind of objections, the Badiou's materialism lacks the notion of social relations as forms of complex interplay of antagonism and mutual determinations. But a concept of mutual determinations and the interplay of relations is a cornerstone or a profound assumption of Marx's theory of value. So the core of the objections is that on the basis of Badiou's theory, you can never reconstruct Marxism's crucial concepts such as capital, value, class, ideology. This is there is a profound gulf between these two streams. The second type of objections. Badiou is oblivious to pre-given social and political forces which create both the terrain of the struggle and the possibility of the emergence of the event. In this view, Badiou appears to be a weak historical materialist because he leaves out of account that which forms and changes the layout of chess pieces on the chessboard of each historical situation. This dismissal brings about that the event and the subject prove to be radically contingent and aleatoric. Their historical and social constitution, in the last resort, is nothing more than a result of casting dice, to use Badiou's phrase from Being and Event. The radical contingency can eventually lead to overemphasizing the transformative effect of subjective decision, as some Badiou's critics pointed. We can say that these two kinds of objections actually point out that there are ruptures or gaps in Badiou's materialism. And I suppose that there is a sort of the Althuserian rupture which has survived in Badiou's theory. For instance, in Badiou's logic of worlds, there is a rupture or a gap between phenomenology of a particular word, which remotely resembles the Althusser's ideology as the word of immediate experience, and the other hand, mathematics of multiple being, which alludes to Althusser's science as the real realm of knowledge. The Badiouian gap between mathematics as the science and phenomenology of a particular word to some extent corresponds to the Althusserian rupture or the gap between science and ideology. As Etienne Balibar put it in his article called Althusser's Object, the Althusserian rupture is not possible to think without a Platonic background. According to Balibar, Althusser's philosophy can be understood as a terrain where Platonism and Spinozism are present at the same time as intertwining and inducing an everlasting tension. The Badiou's work can be seen as this decision for Platonism, which forms a profound thought matrix in the shape of mathematics. Mathematics serves to materialize Platonism in Badiou's work. It means that mathematical operations based on the set theory are supposed to permanently generate a gap between the ontological level of multiple being and phenomenological level of living experience connected to nets of determinations. We can remember Plato's notion of chorismos. Chorismos is a division between the physical world and the world of ideas. And we can say that there is a similar chorismos in Badiou's work, which is chorismos generated by mathematics. And to sum it up, this chorismos, we can say a materialist chorismos, represents the fact that there is a gap between the category of quantity, mathematical category of quantity, and the category of quality on a profound level. The living experience can be voiced due a category of quality, but the numbers and set theory belongs to the category of quantity. But this materialist chorismos can be viewed in two ways. It can be considered to be the crucial fact that opened the gulf between Badiou and historical materialism. The Badiou's theory would be applicable to historical materialism on condition that the set theory in its ontological meaning would be replaced by a type of relational ontology such as the one that was created by Hegel. Secondly, the Badiou's chorismos, contrarily, is just the way to create at last minimum distance towards a historical situation in which historical processes seem not to be creating a political barrier of an emancipatory change. The Badiou's mathematics as the source of a distance can be seen as a means of keeping a perspective of another world after the historical process is stuck in a deadlock. It's the emancipatory meaning of mathematics. So we would rather search for connecting lines between the Badiou's mathematical ontology and historical materialism than abandon the Badiou's mathematics for the sake of historical materialism. I would like to introduce several new terms. First is the term of the appearing mediator. Frederick Jameson coined the term vanishing mediator. This is the term required to complete a transition between two opposing ideas, theories or phenomena. And after completing the transition, the mediator vanishes. The appearing mediator is a term which is used to repeat this process, but there is a difference between vanishing mediator and the appearing mediator. The difference lies in the fact that we have a new theory which is the result of the process. For instance, we can speak about the concept of symptomatical reading as a mediator between Marxism and Badiou. This concept of symptomal reading was developed by Althusser, and if symptomal reading appears to be seems to be the appearing mediator, to interpretation of the symptomal reading gains another features, then the concept had before the emergence of Badiou's theory. To put it plain and simple, the concept of symptomal reading will ever be influenced by the Badiou's theory. When we consider the fact that there is something similar between the symptomal reading and Badiou, of course. The concept of symptomal reading was incorporated into Badiou's concept of generic procedure, searching for the elements of a situation that are connected with the name of the event, for instance. But the point here is an appearing mediator between Badiou and Marx that is closely tied to the symptomal reading, and this is the term of dynamic latency. The dynamic latency expresses a transformative tendency in a social realm, which is immanent in a given social order, however, is not apparent from the point of view of the order. It's voiced by the word latency. So it is unpresented tendency of a given society. Now I would like to apply this concept to the central notion of Badiou's theory, that is the concept of the event and the situation. Into meditation 20 of being on event, Badiou highlighted the event as an interval between an anonymity of an unpresented multiple and the addition of a name. Now we can epitomize the event as a procedure containing 3 steps. First steps consists in the emergence of an eventual site that is made up of elements which are not presented in a given situation. The second step is that there is a multiple which corresponds to mathem matrix of the event. That is such a multiple which is the element of the eventual site embedded in a situation, and at the same time it holds that this multiple is the element of itself. I think that there is an operation which escapes from Badiou's mathematical terminology, and it is a kind of act, because we can ask how it is possible to create a multiple which is the element of itself in practice. And if we consider the examples given by Badiou, examples such as French Revolution, a kind of act must be here to complete or to create self-relating multiple. And here is the point where Lacanian and Žižekian theory of act can be placed, because this multiple which is the element of itself can be interpreted as self-relating act, and this is the act which is based on itself, only on itself. But we are at the second step. This step is crucial because creates an anonymous event. This is an event before its naming. And first step thus follows that consists in a naming of an event. And the proper event appears that only can be a starting point of the generic procedures connected with truth and the subject. The act of naming, therefore, is not only contingent and aleatoric, but there must be an anonymous event which will have been named. The anonymous event represents a potentiality that can be carried out by an act of naming. Here we can engage Aristotle's famous terms potentiality and actuality. There are two potentialities and two actualities in terms of the event. First is potentiality of an eventual site to be transformed into an anonymous event by a political, scientific, artistic or love act. This is the first actuality. This act is the first actuality, the carrying out. And the second is potentiality of an anonymous event to be named by an act of naming. And this act of naming is the second actuality. To the eventual site and anonymous event, these two potentialities can be characterized as a dynamic latency The decisive term is latency. What is at stake is whether Badiou's theory is compatible with the concept of latency, expressing a historical tendency, which is one of the cornerstones of historical materialism. Occasionally, Badiou himself evokes the concept of latency. I must defend here Badiou before Nick. For instance, in his book, Badiou's book, Rebirth of History, Badiou links up riots and uprising into last decade, such as Spanish indignados or the infamous Arabic Spring, to the contemporary capitalism, which, according to Badiou, attests Marx's anticipation that capitalism tends to the full unfolding of the irrational, monstrous potentialities. Badiou then points out a latent eventual side and a latent subjectivity into recent manifestations of resistance. Now I come to another new term, maybe. I would say that this term can be characterized as a post-Badiouian term. And it is term of the symptomal multiple. Symptomal multiple is a multiple that contains elements that are presentable as latent tendencies in relation to a future event. With respect to Badiou's theory, the symptomal multiple is in a special regime of presentation. Its elements can already be deciphered in an approximation in a pre-evental situation. To deciphering of symptoms needn't to be only a retroactive operation done after the establishing a new event, as Badiou put it. Besides mathematics, there is another science that can address the elements of the symptomal multitude. It is precisely historical materialism, which among other things focuses on the tendencies in a given situation. I know that there is only some streams in historical materialism. It is not my point here. The symptomal multiple may be seen as a Badiouian expression for the dynamic latency. The eventual side can be understood as a subset whose elements belong to the set of elements of the symptomal multiple. The eventual side is a subset of the set of symptomal multiple. So we can say that the eventual side and then the event itself is created by the elements loaded with dynamic latency, but at the same time it holds that there are latent elements which don't belong to the eventual site and to the event itself. That only some latencies create the eventual site, not all. I assume that the concept of symptomal multiple at one side is compatible with the whole of Badiou's work, but at the other hand, it's on the borders of the Badiou's way of thinking, and may even go beyond Badiou. In fact, the symptomal multiple change some traits of the event, since the event then contains elements loaded with dynamic latency that are placed into sphere of social relationships formed by contradictions, class composition, and generally the capital as a fundamental social regulator. It follows that the event is not only a contingent formation that could be seen as the effect of a decision retroactively naming a multiple, but at the same time its place, it means the eventual site, is overdetermined by the social whole in the sphere of objectivity. The event thus gains two layers. First one is materialist in the sense of historical materialism, regarding the fact that the event involves elements loaded with dynamic latency. Second layer is idealistic in the sense of Frank Ruda, or over-materialistic in the sense of self-regulating act which is based on itself and detached in a minimum distance from a given situation. This act, self-relating act, can turn that which is concerned to be impossible into possibility, but only on condition that so-called impossibility is a result of ideological misrecognition of symptoms of the possible. Impossibility, which turns into possibility by an idealistic self-relating act, is not amount to impossibility in the sense of absence of objective tendencies in the social whole. One can say that this interpretation of the events is the bedrock of Badiou's theoretical building, is composed by two elements, materialist and idealistic, one which are not in a relation of determination. I mean by this that the presence of latencies or tendencies needn't lead to true act, but at the same time, and I consider it to a small diatribe to Frank Ruda interpretation, or tendencies, I don't know how to say exactly. I claim that to event is only to event is true, which is connected with real latencies in society, but it is not satisfactory condition. It's only a necessary condition to carrying out a true and lasting act. So, to consequence, this reinterpretation of the event is that truth procedures, fidelity to the event and the subject, gain their inspiration and maybe a support, kind of support, in the symptomal reading of the pre-evental work. There is the subject which is on the one side self-relating and maybe paradoxically gains a support which is generated by a concrete analysis of a given state of society. Thank you for your attention.